Happening now, former President Donald Trump is throwing a last-ditch Hail Mary to stop next week's criminal trial and the Stormy Daniels hush money case from moving forward in New York. Joining me now is The Hill's Zach Schonfeld. He's been following every piece of these pieces of litigation. Zach, are Trump's efforts going to work?
Is not looking good for Donald Trump. His lawyers were in court pretty much all week. They were in court on Monday, on Tuesday, and on Wednesday, all before separate appeals court judges trying to convince them to delay this trial. All three of those efforts failed. So yes, he does still have some things on the table. He has this motion to adjourn for prejudicial pretrial publicity. But assuming the judge dismisses that, his only hope really at this point is for some freak thing to happen, right? We've seen a COVID outbreak before happen at a Donald Trump trial. So anything could still happen, but it really is not looking good.
I mean, you talk about a freak thing happening at the porn star hush money trial case. It also is arguably the first criminal trial that's actually going to get started against a sitting or a former president. I mean, there's so much at stake here, but actually dive into the weeds. What are the actual charges that Trump is being tried for next week in case?
This is the first criminal trial, and it may be the only one that reaches a jury, but these charges, as legal experts I talked to, pretty much all agree these are the least serious out of all of Donald Trump's criminal indictments. In this case, he faces 34 counts of falsifying business records. This is a bread and butter white-collar charge that's commonly brought by the Manhattan DA's office, and these are felonies. They're low-level felonies that could carry jail time. So technically, if you add the charges together, Donald Trump could, in theory, be looking at a lengthy prison sentence. But the important thing to remember is he's a first-time offender. He has no criminal record. So a lot of times when we've seen first offenders in the past get convicted on these charges, they haven't faced jail time at all. Now, there is precedent for a defendant on their first time to face jail time on these charges. But when those have become handed down, the charges that I've seen, the sentences have been only a few months, not talking years here.
So you're telling me that, worst case scenario for Trump is that he gets sentenced to a couple of months behind bars.
That's right. And, some of these sentences that we've seen being handed down where defendants did receive a prison sentence, I even saw one case where they were told you only have to go to prison a few days a week for your sentence. So this could be something that's much more relaxed compared to some of the other charges he's facing in these other cases.
I think it was Paris Hilton. She got sentenced to a couple of months and then it got dwindled down to a couple of years. So, there's all of these other issues. But it sounds like what you're saying, though, is that it's a very small possibility, even if he is found guilty, that he would actually report behind bars.
That's right. We could see a sentence here that really just amounts to some sort of fine at the end of the day. So there really are options on the table that don't even bring prison time into the question.
All right, so then you got this whole reality show happening outside of the court. You've got Trump's attacks on the judge's daughter. There's been the gag order. He's tried to get the gag order removed. He says it's his, constitutional right, freedom of speech. If he actually breaks the gag order, what happens then?
So if the judge would first have to make a ruling saying that, one of these statements or more, whether it be his Truth Social post, his remarks outside the courtroom, there actually has to be a finding that they violated the terms of the gag order. So the DA could file a motion and ask the judge to do that. But if the judge were to take that step and find that Trump did violate the gag order, he has some discretion of what he could do then. It could be a fine, but it, in theory, could be something more serious. The judge has reminded Trump and his lawyers in the past that he does have the power to impose criminal contempt. That would be quite an extraordinary step. But if you take, for example, his recent civil fraud trial where he was found to violate the gag order, when he was violating it there, he was just fined.
Is Stormy Daniels going on Jimmy Kimmel next week?
She very well could. At this point, prosecutors have been saying in court that they have been asking witnesses, to try to kind of stay quiet here and not make all these public statements. I don't think the Manhattan DA's office is happy when, Stormy Daniels has been doing her recent media tour for her documentary or when Michael Cohen goes on cable news. But as of right now, there is nothing to stop them. Of course, we'll be on the lookout in case Trump's lawyers during this trial, when the testimony approaches, if they file some sort of motion to basically try to gag, Stormy Daniels or Michael Cohen or some of these other big high-profile witnesses.
Well, and Olivia Nosey has that profile, that recent profile of Stormy Daniels and everything, that how her life has been upended. Where is Stormy Daniels? Is she going to be at the trial? Is she showing up next week? I mean, I say it in all seriousness. Where is Stormy Daniels?
She is on the potential witness list, as far as we can tell, for this trial. Trump, in pretrial motions, had tried to block her from testifying, but those were denied. So as far as we can tell, there's been no change of plans to have her testify. We don't know when she's going to be testifying in this trial. This trial is expected to last 6 weeks, if not more. But I think it might still be a while, right? We first have to get through jury selection. This is a process where, I've been talking with legal experts, and, the optimistic ones about it being done quickly would say that, maybe they can get it done in a week. But others have told me that, this could be a process that extends 2 weeks, 3 weeks, maybe even longer. So it could still be a while before we get to some of these witnesses like Stormy Daniels. But as this documentary has been coming out on Peacock, she has been making the rounds of interviews. And of course, she's getting asked about this case constantly.
Well, I mean, to that point, the longer that this goes on, the more that Stormy Daniels is making the rounds and talking about it, the closer this gets into the conventions. Does that not, or let me ask you, do you think that hurts or helps Trump?
Well, I think, Donald Trump, what we've seen him do in some of these past trials is really try to flip the script and flip the narrative. And basically bring the campaign into the courtroom, right? Remember when he was in that civil fraud trial last year? He was showing up, and every time he walked out of the courtroom, he got to go talk to the cameras. This hush money trial is going to be a very similar setup. There is a gag order in place. Donald Trump does have limitations about how we can talk about this case, but Donald Trump will have an audience each and every time he walks in and out of that courtroom to talk about the news of the day, to talk about Joe Biden, and maybe to talk about some things about this case. So I think it'll be no surprise that Donald Trump, will try to make this courtroom and flip it. And as he always does, try to show himself as the victim and then go after his perceived foes.
All right, Zach Schonfeld, great reporting. When you're up in New York next week, make sure you don't miss your hit with Daily Debrief, but also go get lunch at Michael's. All right, buddy? Great reporting as always. And make sure that you subscribe and check out thehill.com for all of the latest updates surrounding Trump's hush money trial.